Hi, welcome to the Indie Wine Podcast, episode 23. My name is Matt Wood, and I recently connected with Terah Bajjalieh of Terah Wine Co. We discussed her worldwide education, both in schools such as Montpellier in France, and the harvests she's done, including Australia, New Zealand, France, and Oregon. We also discussed starting a winery during the pandemic and being a mentee for other women in the industry through working with Batonnage and other organizations. I hope you enjoy. Here we go.
I was born and raised in San Francisco, and then we moved to San Jose when I was like 10, 11. So I went to high school and college in San Jose, but always would go visit San Francisco. So Bay Area native.
Was wine like a part of your family growing up at all?
No, not really. I wish it was. Food was a big part of family life.
Okay.
I'm Palestinian by background, first generation, and so there was always very big meals and lots of hours cooking in the kitchen with grandma.
Nice.
Yeah, so my grandparents and ancestors were farmers, and so they did have grapevines and made wine just for personal consumption and for the field worker consumption, but they didn't sell it commercially. So growing up, wine just wasn't really always part of the dinner table, but I got into it later as I got more into food in my early 20s.
Any favorite dishes from your childhood?
Yeah. I mean, I love rolled grape leaves. A lot of like the Middle Eastern salads have fresh mint and lentils and like lots of herbs and spices. So there's like a lentil salad dish that's really yummy. It has like fresh tomato, cucumber, or like tabbouleh salad is also really good.
Mm-hmm. So you stayed in San Jose to go to college, right? To go to San Jose State?
Yeah, I studied at State. I worked, full-time during college. Lived off campus and studied business and finance, and started traveling when I was in college there through like study abroad programs, but stayed locally because it was cheaper.
Where were some of the places that you were able to travel to with the programs?
We went to Guatemala for about a month, and I did a immersion program where I lived with a family. I took Spanish lessons. So we lived with the family for about a month, and then we did like a week's worth of travel. That was like a summer program. And then my last year at San Jose State, we went to Brazil
Nice.
and took like a history class. So I always wanted to travel and loved that experience. So that was just my way of kind of getting abroad through studies.
Awesome.
It was fun. Yeah.
How did you find yourself interested in wine?
After graduating and working in finance for a couple of years, I found myself just not really enjoying finance and the industry, and kind of thinking of things that I started thinking of other career options. And so I started looking at culinary schools, and I visited a few campuses around the U.S. And then while I was visiting culinary schools, I found a sommelier program, and I wasn't ready to bite the bullet on another degree, so and the cost that was involved with that. So I did this kind of cheaper wine program. It was a little bit shorter too.
Okay.
Just to kind of get my feet wet and figure out what it was going to do. And through that program, I realized I could still be involved in food and travel the way I wanted to, but just through a different medium. And I really loved what I was learning and who I was learning from, and just decided to make wine the direction that I wanted to take with my career change.
Okay. So what was your path then once you finished up that course? Did you jump right into more sommelier classes or going more in that kind of the restaurant direction or more the production side?
I started working in hospitality. So I worked at a wine bar for maybe close to a year. Okay. I did some writing for a wine bar that was in Santana Row, and like some consulting for that shop. And then I did take a couple other classes while working, and then I ended up going into fine dining for about a year. So after
Okay.
about 2 years of working in hospitality, I decided to go work a harvest in Argentina.
Hmm.
And initially, I just wanted to learn more about production because the level two course through the court was great, but I didn't feel like I knew too much about production. So it was just a matter of like learning production and trying to understand production better.
Mm-hmm.
But then that one harvest led to several,
Okay.
and then I kind of headed down the winemaking path. Partly it was so much fun to travel and meet other people around the world, and it was just like my world opened up to
Mm-hmm.
all these new things. And I was constantly learning and growing, so it was quite easy to like make that shift from working in hospitality.
Nice. And so you're hopping back and forth to the northern and southern hemispheres, it sounds like
Yeah,
then.
yeah. So I started in 2012 and would go. So I went to Argentina first, and I came back, and I went to Sonoma after that, and then to New Zealand. And I managed to do 2, sometimes 3 harvests a year.
Okay.
And
Nice.
I did that for close to 4 years. And then in 2015, I worked a few harvests in 2015, and then I went back to school and did a graduate program in France.
Okay.
So, yeah. After about a few years of production, I realized like that was what I wanted to do was winemaking. I much preferred cellar work and working with my hands. But I realized like harvest work was great, but it wasn't going to teach me the science and that I needed to really understand what I was doing,
Mm-hmm.
So I started just working as many harvests as I could to try to save money for grad school. So then I spent 2 years in Europe studying.
So you went to grad school in France, right?
Yes, I did. The first year was France, and then the program allowed us to go to another country. There was a consortium of 5, maybe 6 universities, and we got to pick where we went for the second year. So then I went to Spain and studied in Madrid, and I continued my thesis research at the University of Madrid. So,
Okay.
and then after that second year, I went back to France and did harvest in Burgundy towards the tail end of the program.
What made you lean towards going to school in Europe as opposed to Davis or Fresno or something like that?
Well, for Davis, I would have had to take like a year's worth of chemistry courses.
Okay.
Because I had like no science and chemistry classes being a business finance major.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of deterred me. I wanted to learn and study, but 3 years versus 2 years was a lot. And Davis was also a lot more expensive than the program in Europe.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, for me, it was like much more hands-on. They took us to vineyards. They took us to, we were like constantly traveling in the program. So it was just more of the educational component that I wanted rather than just classroom time. So,
Okay.
yeah, it
Nice.
was, in my opinion, it was pretty amazing. So
That's wonderful. Your opinion's the one that counts for that.
I've heard great things about Davis, but Montpellier is like also a really respected program, and we got to learn from professors at the peak of their research from all over the world that would come in and teach us about their research. So it's a really great program.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just made more sense for me, I think.
What was your thesis on?
My thesis was a combination of what the we had to pick a topic with our counselors, and so the University of Madrid does a lot of research with tannins and oak chips and various tannin products, enological tannin products.
Okay.
But I was interested in learning about skin contact and orange wines, and so we combined both of those ideas. So I did a trial with wood chips versus skin contact and how tannins and phenolics changed with these various fermentation styles.
Okay. Was it focused on white wines or? on?
Yes,
Okay.
white wines. Yeah, I had grown really interested in orange wines being
Mm-hmm.
in France the year before, and started doing like a couple of small projects. But and so that's what I wanted to do my research on. But the professor made me include some other factors in there as well. But it was good. It's great. My classes were taught in Spanish, so I got to learn like a ton of Spanish while I was out there.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Come in handy for you.
Oh yes. it was. I was lost for the first month, but after that, you learn quick. You adjust when you're like just immersed in something like that.
Yeah, at that point you don't have too much of a choice, I guess, but to learn it
you,
if
yeah,
that's how
you
it's being
drowned or
taught.
you.
Yeah, sink
Yeah.
or swim.
hmm
Were any of the harvests especially memorable to you? Any that you just loved more than others, or that were kind of closer to your heart?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were definitely like bits and pieces from each place that um, were memorable for me, and generally they were memorable for different reasons. So it's hard to just pick one.
Mm-hmm.
I would say New Zealand. In New Zealand, I worked in the Marlborough region, and I worked for Wither Hills, which is a larger wine producer. But that was probably the most fun I've ever had while being abroad. And it was mostly because I was living in a house with like 13 other people from all over the world. And, you just get very close with people. It's a very like dynamic living situation and work
Mm-hmm.
environment. We lived on the property. And then I went back for a second harvest the next year. And some of the people that were there the first year also came back for a second year. So I just made really great friends out there. And people that I still get to keep in touch with to this day that are around the world. So that was just really amazing. And I, just really value those friendships that I
Mm-hmm.
built abroad. Um, I still reach out to my friend in Spain and like ask him questions about winemaking. And we kind of, it's just really, it's cool. But I, I always wanted to work in France, and it took me like 5 years to make that happen.
Okay.
And so working in Burgundy was certainly like felt great that I could finally accomplish that. And that was a very like intense harvest. And in terms of learning, I learned a ton there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, that was probably another highlight of my harvest experiences. But thankfully, I've had some good experiences over the years. So there's also other people to mention and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you must have seen a pretty amazing set of different ways to work, different terroirs and environments and grapes. And
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure you saw like an entire range of ways to work that you could kind of pick and choose what you were able to pull from it and incorporate
Yeah.
into your work.
Yeah. It was a great way to learn, and it was like a very fast and intense way to learn. But I like moving fast. I like learning, and so I think that was one of the reasons why I kept doing it. It was fun and very dynamic. I'd
Mm-hmm.
be working in one cellar in one country, and within a matter of a couple of months, you're working somewhere else with sometimes people that don't speak English, with equipment that the equipment was pretty similar. Like there might be a range of technology and automation that you'd see in some
Mm-hmm.
cellars versus the other, and some cellars being like very manual and a little bit more just physical labor required. But yeah, there's techniques and things that I saw over the years that I think about to this day, and um, things that have definitely like stuck with me about how to treat certain varietals and how not to treat certain varietals.
Okay.
So yeah, it was good. I recommend anyone to at least work a couple abroad.
So what was your path after graduating? Where did you go? Did you continue hopping around to harvests at all, or did you kind of settle into
Yeah,
one area?
I did hop around a little bit just because I needed to work and I needed to bring in some cash. So
Mm-hmm.
I used my student visa to work in Burgundy. And then from Burgundy, it was a 5-week harvest. So after Burgundy, I went to Oregon. That was one place. in the US that I hadn't worked. So I worked for a family in Oregon and caught the harvest there. And then towards the end of harvest, I started looking for work, and there was another winery that needed help. So I stayed on with them through the winter, through the holiday season, and helped them finish up some wines and start blending for their next year's harvest. And then I was looking for permanent jobs at the time, but so I ended up getting a job with Constellation Brands.
Okay.
And that's what brought me back to California. I considered staying in Oregon, but I just didn't. I had one like permanent offer, but it wasn't much of a jump in terms of responsibility from a cellar hand position. So I ended up taking the Constellation Brands job. And so I moved back to California in 2018 and worked in one of their Central Coast wineries for about a year and a half. Yeah.
And what did that job entail?
So that job was a fairly new program that Constellation Brands launched at the time. They were offering a sort of immersive training program where the idea was that you would go and work in 3 separate departments over a 2-year period. And so the first year, well, it was a little under a year, I spent working as an enologist in one of their large production facilities, like huge production. So I spent some time there, and then from there I went into their vineyard department and worked as a viticultural technician, which basically meant I was going around scouting at their other vineyards and monitoring the growing season, scouting for like pests and disease, and monitoring any issues between the 5 ranches that were sort of part of my territory. I shared this area. It was like about 2,000 acres that myself and another girl shared. So, and then from there, we were supposed to shift into grower relations, and then kind of back into production. So, but I ended up taking another role after about a year and a half in that program.
At Constellation or moving somewhere else?
No, I moved to another large winery as an assistant winemaker. So it was a bit of a promotion for me. Yeah, so I moved further north, still on the Central Coast, but closer to the South Bay area, and worked for them for about a year and a half. And then shortly thereafter, I was recruited by a small family in the Central Coast to be their winemaker. So I started with them in 2021.
Your wines tend to be kind of more on the natural and low intervention side. What was kind of your transition like from going from like Constellation to much more minimal style and lighter touch? Was that something like you had in your mind? That's the style of wine that you're making now is what you wanted to do, or was that a more kind of gradual realization?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I mean, I would say when I was younger and when I was interning for other people, I always tried really hard to work for like high-end producers and learn how to work with fruit that is famous in certain regions, or certain regions are known for certain varietals, right? So I really tried to build a foundation of knowledge like based on high quality winemaking. And my experience at Constellation Brands was very much about quantity and production and making a consistent product that is mass produced. And that was never really my intention. But when I graduated from college, I needed a job. I needed to make money. And I had never worked in a large corporate environment like that. So I was kind of curious what it could be like and what it could mean for my career, because, there's different aspects to that are like beneficial, right? But at the end of the day, it wasn't what like fed my soul. It wasn't the kind of wines that I love to drink and I love to explore. And so, you know, like me starting my own brand took a while. It took me a while to kind of come to that realization, but I never intended to make wines like that. You know, it was always just a matter of making wines that I enjoyed drinking. And I think my time in France certainly pushed me into, it didn't push me, but I started exploring more natural wine. I started experiencing orange wine and skin contact and all these more unique varietals that I hadn't really come into contact with. And so, and then going to some natural wine fairs, I was like really opened up to this whole world. And so I think that helped make that shift for me when I started studying there. But, you know, at the end of the day, like my foundation of experience was built on high quality winemaking. And a lot of those producers made wines naturally. They just don't market themselves as natural winemakers, you know? So I think that was like always the inspiration. And that's where the passion comes from. And that's why I choose to make wines the way I do, because it's about making the best product that I can and making wines that really showcase where they're from and showcase the varietals that they are. Yeah. So it's just, you know, sometimes jobs take you in a different direction. You don't always have control over those things. So
totally. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
What year did you launch Terah?
I launched it in 2020 during the pandemic.
How was starting a winery during the pandemic?
You know, for me, it was great because I got laid off. And so I suddenly had extra time on my hands and I had started thinking about it, I would say the year before, and I started researching things, but juggling a full-time job, I never really had, I had like very little time to get into it. And so suddenly I had all this time to really like do all these things that I wanted to do. And it was great. I just kind of seized the moment and started working on permits and working on my branding, my website, what my labels would look like. And I suddenly just had all this time to like just plow through this huge list of to-dos.
Yeah.
And I thankfully was able to get a little garage permitted.
Okay.
And make a couple tons. And so I was able to start off real small with really minimal equipment. And I made 120 cases that first year. And, you know, wasn't much, but it was enough to like allow me to get out and start talking to people and selling wines and, you know, start that process of sales.
Yeah. What did you start with that first year?
I got a half ton of Tempranillo from Matthew Warwick up in the foothills, and I made some Patinat with that.
Okay.
I also bought a ton of Pinot Gris from San Luis Obispo County, and I made that in two different ways. We also made another Patinat with half of it, and then a skin contact Ramato style Pinot Gris with the other half ton. And then I got a little bit of Kerner from Lodi. Okay. And some Pinot Noir from Slow as well. The same vineyard.
I'm sorry. Did you say 120 cases that first year?
Yeah, roughly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a little of everything, barrel of each or something for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah. Just, it was a half ton of 30 cases of Patinat. Well, of each SKU, so there's like 60 total cases of sparkling, and then 60 cases of the other stuff. We had one barrel of Pinot, one barrel of Ramato. Yeah, super small, but it was fun. It was nice to like wake up and just walk out to the garage and do morning punch downs and taste things and really just take my time with things. It was kind of a luxury, I would say.
Yeah. Do you think your finance degree helped you get all that paperwork and everything in order quicker than average?
No, I don't think the degree helped. I would say just more drive and kind of tenacity to get stuff done.
Okay. Yeah.
Like the finance stuff definitely helps me to think of things from a numbers perspective and to keep a very close eye on the numbers because, you know, there's all these costs and I think it's really important to like drill down into your costs.
Hmm.
And so finance and business and being like very numbers focused, which I always have been, even at a younger age, has certainly helped me to keep like a real keen eye on those things. But I think at the end of the day, like getting this huge list of things done is about how much you want it and how much time you're willing to put into getting it all done.
Hmm. Yeah,
And it,
sounds like you put a lot of time into it, and that's
yeah, I mean, everyone has to.
yeah.
Whoever's started a business like this, if you're not hiring someone in compliance, you're doing it all yourself, and eventually you work through it.
How have you grown the winery since that first harvest?
So I've grown by finding more vineyard sources, more varietals to work with in different regions. So I still work with Sierra Foothills fruit, but just from a different grower. And then I started sourcing from Lodi. And so I work with Vermentino and Sangiovese from Lodi. I also just last year added Falanghina into the mix from Contra Costa
Okay.
County. Yeah, that's a
Nice.
fun one.
Yeah, there's not too much of that around.
No, there isn't. I just bottled up my first vintage of it, so I'm excited to see how it's received. Yeah, it was fun.
That's awesome. And you working with some fruit from kind of the Central Coast and
Yeah.
South Bay area also, right?
Yes, I am. There's a few vineyards out there that I work with. There's new Syrah and Grenache vineyards from two different vineyards that I work with.
Okay.
And so last year I made some rosé, and then I also made a blend of red wine from those two vineyards. Old Vine Muscat from
Oh.
N's Vineyard,
Okay.
which is really fun.
Mhm.
And then I also get a little bit of Old Vine Grenache from Basson Vineyard,
Oh, very nice.
which is a gem in the lineup.
Yeah.
It's really special. Planted in 1912. It's all dry farmed, head trained, and George Basson is really amazing to work with. So it's pretty cool. I just bottled this. Actually, no, we just released the very first vintage in the spring, and the next one will come out next spring.
Yeah, I tried that one. It's wonderful. It's great.
Oh yeah, we did taste that at
And by the way,
By the way,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was
Oh.
really good. Yeah.
Thank you.
What is it that you look for in a vineyard source?
Well, at a minimum, I want them to be farming with organic practices. At a minimum, so no herbicides and hopefully organic pesticides. Sometimes it takes some time to transition.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the baseline. Secondly, I think I'm looking to see if I can establish a long-term relationship with the grower,
Okay.
and if they're going to be easy to work with, if they're going to accommodate someone maybe starting out on a smaller scale and with the desire to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these vineyards, like there isn't much fruit to be had, like the Grenache or maybe the Barbera that I get from in a Shake Ridge Ranch. So sometimes I get in on the vineyard because I just want to work with that vineyard because I know the quality is great, or maybe the grower is great.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes you end up having to just take whatever you can get. And then other times it's a matter of thinking about how I could maybe scale certain SKUs,
Okay.
and do those growers have more fruit available for me to grow with, and will I be able to grow with them? Because sometimes the demand is so high on these vineyards that you might get a ton this year, and then next year if you want to grow, that it won't be available. So
Okay.
that's really tricky to try to figure out when you're trying to grow and scale, like who's the right people to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's sort of why things have been in constant flux, I would say, over the last couple of years as I'm growing.
Yeah, kind of finding where you fit in and what vineyards are the right choice for, I guess, for you and for the
Yeah.
vineyard manager or owner also.
Yeah. For them, sometimes it's, they need to make the most money they can get, and sometimes it's easier to work with fewer people than more. So rather than work with smaller buyers, they choose to work with bigger buyers, which, it just takes time to figure that out and figure out where there's opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So,
what's your approach to winemaking once you get these grapes off the vine? Where's your head at for the winemaking process?
That's a good question. I mean, sometimes I have an idea about how I'm going to make something in advance before working with it. Like there may be a certain style of wine that I want to make, whether it's like sparkling or orange or rosé. And so sometimes things are predestined for certain things. And then other times, maybe you get the fruit and you come to realization that, oh, this might be better in this way. So once in a great while, I'll kind of make an on-the-fly choice about things, or maybe I want to keep something on skins a little bit longer to experiment with technique. So I try to be like flexible. Sometimes with the climate and weather, like you might have issues with fruit. Thankfully, I haven't had a lot of fruit that's come in that doesn't look great, but you have to be open to changing things and being able to handle things when it comes in. But generally I kind of have an idea ahead of time, and whether, for example, like whether I'm going to leave it whole cluster or destem it. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Sometimes your destemmer breaks, and then you don't get to choose if you destem it or not. But like, generally, there's the ideas there, and try to follow through with them. Always trying to work like really clean and sanitized stuff. That's like another thing that I'm really picky about, is making sure sanitation is really like on point and clean, and try to minimize like oxygen at the right points.
Yeah, stay clean so you don't have to fix anything later on down the line.
Yeah. I guess you could say sometimes I make wines in a reductive way, like keeping things on lees, or and no racking, versus maybe taking things off of lees. So just depending on the varietal, I may keep things on lees and keep it in barrel, or with other things, I rack off mallow lees and age it in stainless to keep things really like fresh and tight aromatically.
Kind of depending on those lees and not racking to sort of protect the wine a bit and keep it reductive.
Yeah. Like with things like Pinot Noir or Chardonnay, I do age on lees for protection and for just like texture and overall character. And then with other things, I've generally racked off lees, like some of the orange wines that I've made, or the Sangioveses and the Barberas and things like that. I usually rack off mallow lees.
Okay.
But I'll still be like pretty protective with oxygen and things like that during racking.
Are you bottling before the next vintage generally?
Generally, yeah. The first year I did, I bottled things really early. And then the second, in 2021, the only thing that I over vintaged was the Grenache and Sangiovese.
Okay.
Everything else was bottled within about 10 months. And this next year, again, I will over vintage the old vine Grenache, and this time it'll be a Pinot Noir that I over vintage, and then everything else is like the spring wines are usually bottled within about 5 months, and then the fall releases are released in about a 10 to 11 month time frame.
Okay. Are you adding anything new for this upcoming harvest? Are you working with any new grapes or vineyards or anything that you want to talk about? If you want to keep them a secret, that's okay too.
It's always good to surprise people. I am working with a new vineyard. Well, sort of new. I've worked with the vineyard before, but this time I'll be working with their Sangiovese from Stiletto Vineyard. So it's San Benito County.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will be working with 2 different vineyards for Sangiovese this year. So that's new.
Are you planning on kind of vineyard designating them, or will that become a larger blend?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I'm going to vineyard designate that and probably age it a bit longer than the Lodi fruit, but I'm not quite sure yet. I don't really know what the wine's going to be like.
Sure.
I have a feeling it'll have a lot more structure and might just need a little more time, but I'm going to just see how it goes, see how it tastes, and it's sort of a trial wine this year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fun.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, that's a great vineyard. I've had lots of really good wines from there. And
Yeah,
a lot of fun varieties grown there. It seems like also.
yeah.
Seems
It's like a winemaker's playground.
Yeah, it seems
So
like
much fun.
everybody really likes working with them and working with that vineyard. So I've heard a lot of good things about it.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Ron Stiletto, who planted all that stuff, really had a cool vision, and we're all benefiting from that vision, thankfully.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I wanted to ask you about one of the other things you do, which is that you're involved in Batonnage. You're the mentee liaison officer. Is that right? Is that your title?
Yes, my volunteer title.
How did you get involved with Batonnage?
I attended one of their forums years ago, and then in 2021, I signed up to be a mentee. So I benefited from the program in 2021 and met with many mentors that year, and that was, a pretty pivotal moment, I think, for me, because that's when I was going out there and starting to sell wines, and so it was a great way to connect with buyers and people in the retail space. And then the next year, I just wanted to stay involved and collaborate with people and help and volunteer my time. So I reached out to the organization to see if I could mentor or if there was some way to get involved. And that's when they asked me to be this mentee liaison officer, which is just really kind of answering questions for people who are curious and maybe directing people to certain mentors or socializing with them at events and things like that, and just trying to be supportive of the organization and contribute in ways that they need. Most everyone is a volunteer. So,
okay. Were you able to have a lot of women mentors when you were coming up, or do you feel like this is a way to sort of pass that on to the next generation, maybe things that you didn't have?
Yeah, I don't think I really had many women. I didn't have many mentors, whether male or female, when I was kind of growing and learning. I definitely had like women who were supportive and who taught me things, but I was always hopping from vintage to vintage. And so, it was really tough to like form a long-term relationship with people because I was always going somewhere new. So I certainly had a few women over the years be really supportive and help. But I wouldn't say it was like formal mentorship, but that support is one of the reasons why I want to be involved, because I think we all need mentorship, whether it's women or men. It's this industry can be very hard to navigate and even harder for some of us of certain groups. And I think, the more support that we can have, the better. And it's also just nice to have a bigger community to be a part of, even for myself, so.
That's pretty awesome to be able to do that and be willing to do it. And even if it is answering questions and funneling people one way or the other, that stuff always means a lot to people, I think, when they're starting out. So.
Yeah, I hope so. And I get a lot from it too. I mean, it's a great way for me to meet new people coming up in the industry, and it's a pretty amazing group of people that are giving their time for this, and I've seen a lot of positive things from it, and so I'm happy to help whichever way I can, and if that's what the organization needs, I'm happy to do it. Yeah, it's been really good. We just did a happy hour. I was pouring at Habibi Wine Bar in San Francisco, and tried to promote it as a social gathering for new mentees, and a few people showed up, and yeah, it's really rewarding to just meet other people wanting to grow in wine and meet people who are really enthusiastic about wine. So it's fun. It's a good way to connect with people.
Does it tend to be people trying to get into different aspects of wine? Is there sort of one aspect of it that seems it's heavier on than others, as far as either more sommelier focused or producer focused or restaurateur focused?
No, I think it's a pretty broad range of people. I mean, there's people who, I would say, there's people who have worked in the industry for probably a few years who are either maybe thinking of getting into a different field, or they're just looking for a little bit of direction and help in pursuing whatever area they're already in. And then there's people who are also just like fresh and don't know much about what field they're inquiring about. But I would say that there's probably I guess I haven't seen every single application. I'm not part of the committee that looks at people that apply, so I don't know what people are applying for. But they do have several different areas of the wine industry that they try to funnel applicants into. So at the end of the day, it's pretty even with whether it be production or retail or hospitality or business. Now is it sort of a newer component that they added to the program. Okay. So we try to keep it, there's always so many mentors and so much time that each mentor has. So we try to keep it fair and feasible for them to work with certain groups. I think the first year that I was involved, there was lots and lots of mentees in the groups, and it became a little hard for the mentors to handle. So now I think they're trying to structure the program so that each mentor has a certain number of mentees, and it's a little bit more manageable. So it ends up kind of being fair across each segment. I think various organizations that I volunteer with. Dream Big Darling, I got a scholarship from. Okay. Along with the Wine Dialogues. That was through the Women Wine and Spirits organization. So I got scholarships from those two groups. And Lift Collective, I actually also got a scholarship from them. And so I volunteered last year with their conference preparation. Oh, okay. Just to give back, because this first scholarship I got from them was pretty helpful in my first year. And then Hugh Society is more of like a membership organization that builds community. And they have different chapters across the U.S. And I don't really volunteer my time, but I get together with people from the committee. And there's a lot of crossover between Hugh Society and Lift Collective and various organizations that are out to support people in wine. But I think it could also be really important to mention that there's a lot of organizations like Wine Fair that puts on an annual tasting for women in wine, and that has been really supportive. And I think one of the coolest things about natural wine, especially in the Bay Area, is that it's been very supportive and welcoming for newcomers like me. And I think that's helped me just in terms of launching the business. It's helped me to get press out. There's a lot of really great supporters in the Bay Area that I think are just supporting me as a person and not necessarily buying the wines. They may like them, but I think that they're just trying to help small producers like myself that are trying to do what I'm doing. And I definitely want to thank all the people in the Bay Area that have been really supportive and buying my new releases. I was mostly just selling my wines myself direct for the last couple of years. Okay. And I do want to thank everyone who's been very supportive and helped me over the last couple of years. And so wine fairs like Wine Fair, SF has been a great way for me to show my wines and meet distributors and meet buyers in the Bay Area. And most of these, like Wine Fair is a nonprofit, I believe. And so they're putting on these fairs to build community and to give people like myself a way to share our wines. And there's lots of other great fairs that are popping up around the US that are giving us a platform to show what we're doing. I think it's, it's noble work because it's allowing us to do it. And in return, we show up and we pour free samples for everyone, and it gives everyone a way to kind of enjoy it. But, this community is sort of full circle. It's hard to operate if you don't have support of the other people in the business. So I think it's important we all kind of support each other in that way. New releases. Yeah, I got a pretty fun lineup that will release September 1 with lots of new wines this year.
Okay.
It might as well announce it. I will be releasing a Chardonnay from Massa Vineyard, which is in Carmel Valley, and a Skin Contact Falangina that we were talking about earlier. I also will release the Syrah Grenache Red Blend, and then the 22 vintage of the Barbera from Shaker's Ranch, which is one of my favorite wines.
Wow, nice, yeah.
And then another Sangiovese from Lodi. The next vintage will be coming out. So, yeah, those will be out soon. Excited to share them with everybody.
Yeah, that's very exciting. What's the best place for folks to get them?
I would say head to my website. That's probably the fastest way. terahwineco.com, www.terahwineco.com. And I have a small wine club. Would love for y'all to join. There's no commitments. You can drop out anytime. And there's a lot of placements in the Bay and in San Francisco East Bay, where we'll do pop-ups and maybe in-person drop-offs so you don't have to pay for shipping. Just reach out and DM me or, shoot me an email. Yeah, that's probably the best way.
Awesome. Any other new plans for the winery or anything?
Yeah. Production. I'm actually moving my production space to Richmond this year. I just finished moving this weekend, actually.
Okay, awesome.
So I was making wines in Gilroy, and now I'm moving into a sort of a shared space. Another brand owns it, and they allow a few of us smaller brands to come in and make wines there. So I'm excited to be based a little more north in terms of winemaking, and I think it'll give me a lot more access to people in the industry, which I'm stoked about.
Thanks for listening to today's episode with Terah. She's making a great style of wine. The Vermentino and Grenache have been my favorites, but I think there's something I love about all of them. And you can sign up for the website, terahwineco.com, to get first dibs on the new releases. You can also follow the Instagram at Terah Wine Company. You can follow the podcast on wherever you're listening, and the Instagram at Indie Wine Podcast. Feel free to email indiewinepodcast@gmail.com with comments, questions, or feedback. If you can tell your wine friends about the podcast too and help spread the word, I'd really appreciate it. Rating or subscribing helps too. There's also now a Patreon set up if you feel like supporting the podcast monetarily to hopefully allow for more episodes, more travel, and to help defray other costs. The link is in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode. Have a good one.